This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much. I'll start the conversation just by making a comment prompted by our last session. I got to thinking about my work with the Hammonds family in West Virginia, and it was a project to explore all of their cultural traditions, not just songs and fiddle tunes and banjo tunes, but also storytelling, riddles, all sorts of verbal lore, and way of life. And the project eventually became a kind of a history of the Hammonds family that we published, a cultural history, you might say, and to which they greatly contributed. In fact, we couldn't have figured out their actual history as best we can figure it out without using their stories as a basis for it. But it was an interesting result of that my colleague and I, Carl Fleischauer, and I did a lot of this work together with the Hammondses, and we were curious about what they thought about their origins and explored it with them. Where do you feel you're from? And they were kind of vague about it, but if you prompted them, they said, oh yes, I guess we were from across the sea or something, and maybe England, maybe Ireland, wanting to be obliging in conversation. If you suggested any possibility, that sounded fine with them. And so I did all I could genealogically. The name Hammonds, though, turns up both in England and in Ireland, and so I was still left uncertain. They appear on the Virginia landscape in the later part of the 18th century, and then move around, first up into the Appalachians, and then around within the Appalachians over the next century or so. Their own storytelling, though, interestingly enough, doesn't refer to England or Ireland or the Old World at all. Actually, their earliest story as they look at their family history is a story about encounter with the Indians on the American frontier. And so their own storytelling suggests that they thought of themselves as Americans, and other categories of contributing to their culture were just incidental, you might say. So I thought of that again as we all talked, and a couple of the speakers in the earlier session suggested that, and Henry in fact also suggested, that whatever we do to pick out strands of connection, we should look at the whole fabric as well as the individual strands and make sure that the picture we are drawing represents the full fabric in all of its complicated and ornate glory. So with that, I'll turn to the group and ask, actually I'll ask a question to get us started. It occurred to me hearing the presentations earlier that one possible motive in certain features being like Scottish music being more influential than America is the fact that Scotland went through this major revival in the late 18th and early 19th century with lots of publications and lots of interest in their culture as a matter of national discussion, you might say. And if we fret sometimes that there's less to turn to, at least in instrumental music from Ireland, maybe part of the problem is that they weren't at that period going through a similar period of consciousness raising that sort of imprinted everyone, and including other people. Certainly it's true that Scottish music influenced American music. It influenced it partly by direct bringing tunes over, but it also influenced it because popular culture in America embraced the idea in the 19th century of Scotland as being a kind of a, particularly in the South, they loved the idea of the Scottish connection. And there was little talk of Irish connection in the early and mid-19th century, a lot of talk of Scottish connection. And it shows up in popular music. Foster's tunes as our Thomas Moore, Foster's tunes are full of Scottish references, including Scotch snaps and other features that were thought by everybody to be reflecting the Scottish consciousness. So to what degree do these conscious revivals affect the subsequent flow of culture as much as the individual bringing tunes over that we like to imagine? So I pose that question to the group. Do you want to get us started, Fintan?
Well, yeah, I would be maybe say something that's typically Irish, in that you really can't, in that period you're talking about, you really can't ignore the effect of religion. And the majority of the Scottish settlers coming here, or the Scottish settlers who have been in Ireland for 100 years who came here, the dominant religion there is some form of Presbyterian, or at that time would have been Presbyterian. And to be of the Reformed Church was a definite asset in the New America in the 18th, 19th and early 20th centuries. To be an Irish Catholic was a definite no-no. So you're talking about people who are moving into more influential positions in society. Like, for instance, of the 17 of the whatever number of American presidents you have come from with some kind of a connection to Ulster or Scottish backgrounds. And of that 17, I think 12 of them were Presbyterian. I'm not hung up on religion at all, but I actually think that indicates these people moved into high places in society. They were in the military, in industry, they were trusted positions, they had influence, they were literacy in music. So there's a huge pool of influence coming out from that, directly related to opportunity. The Irish people who came appear to have been absorbed, as somebody, I think it was Paul mentioned, been absorbed straight into folk culture and emerged later. So does that help? Does that?
This is, I think, a perfectly legitimate point, and I totally agree with it, except I'd amend it a little bit in this way, that we tend to think of religion back then as a sort of a backwards projection of our view of religion now. And most of the evidence suggests that on the American frontier, at least, in the late 18th century, early 19th century, there actually was very little religion. Yeah. So religion was not a major factor. And that's why the people who were there, you can't always be sure by what they are later when they joined a church, what they were when they arrived, when they might have been they might have been Irish Catholics, but here, there wasn't any church at all, much less a Catholic.
So what I meant was, in the Irish sense, if you say, certainly up until the middle of till the turn of the 2000s, if you indicate, say, religion, that means a political persuasion.
Yes,
if you're Catholic, you're disloyal to the British establishment and all to do with it. If you're a Protestant of any denomination, you're loyal. So I'm talking about loyalty and disloyalty, or potential disloyalty. That's what I indicate by that. But I do take what you're saying.
Yeah, but it's interesting because even there, the loyalties here are a new situation. That is, now you can't be disloyal to the crown anymore because we threw them out. We in effect pitched overboard a lot to recreate culture anew, or that was the working attitude of many people. Of course they didn't. You can't create much new in the world, and so you end up adopting things that are your natural way of expressing yourself.
Could the models have been set before the revolution? If it was all cast in stone before then, well, maybe is that what we're talking about?
Absolutely. Well, you guys, I'll pull you into it as well if I can. Art, do you have a comment on that, or on anything else?
Yes, I have some to play. Maud Thacker singing a song.
What's the song that you're going to sing?
In 1980, and
King William Duke Jambo.
And I'll have my Irish colleagues tell
Yeah,
folks what
ready.
this is about.
July the 1st at the break of day in 1620, King William Duke Shambo and his commanders prepared to fight King James and his army. The foe was the first to cross the band, and the horsemen followed after. King William Duke Shambo, he lost his life crossing the Colbine waters.
I'll stop there. The song, she called it King William Duke Shambo, and of course it refers to the Battle of the Boyne. She says 1,620. It was really 1,690. And the question of identification, I'm sure that you can confirm this. The song's still sung in Ireland, isn't it? As Boyne Water.
As the Boyne Water. King William tossed his bomb balls in and set them all on fire. Yes, but this, I must admit, is the first I have heard of this particular song being located here. Well, and therefore I'm slightly flummoxed, but it is clear that that particular tune is, rather the tune which is conventionally in Ireland known as the Boyne Water, is present in one of those shape note hymnals which I mentioned from the early 19th century. And so there are evidences to be explored, but like everything else about this circumstance, we get small pieces of information separate from one another in very disparate places, and we have to try to assemble them so that this singing comes to me as a revelation, and I would wish to take a very close look at it, because there were two songs of the Battle of the Boyne, each of them with, shall we say, commonalities in words and tune, but at the same time they can be traced distinctively, and this was done in the late 19th century by Canon Abraham Hume in an article in the Ulster Journal of Archaeology, of which few of you will have heard, and it only goes to show the obscurity of some of the places that we may have to look in order to get some early information about this material.
I'll get us back to the singer. She sang other verses, and they were somewhat garbled. Duke Shambo was Frederick Schomburg, who was one of the commanders of William of Orange, who I guess he actually died crossing the river. But to her, the song did not have the political references that I would imagine would still be present in singers in Ireland who would know the story. To her, it was just an old song she learned from her father, and it was and she said her father liked songs about wars and people killing people, and so the fact that it was garbled and fragmentary, she said, well, he sang a lot more of it, but that was all that she retained. So the fragment sort of took on its own life. When we look at it historically, of course, it is very important in that whole story of the Scotch-Irish and the Protestantation of Northern Ireland, all these things. But she didn't know anything about that. The singer you'll meet tomorrow, Mary Lomax, who's a ballad singer, active ballad singer from North Georgia, she is proud of her mother's family being Irish, but similar to what you were talking about, Alan, if we ask her about her ancestors, American Indian on one side, Irish on the other, but she's very vague about where her repertoire comes from, and the repertoire that you'll hear is this kind of mixture that has been spoken to earlier this point. Wow. English, Scottish, American text put to Irish tunes. Actually, she sings a version of Rosin the Bow, which is the tune of Willow Garden, quite close, with three different verses. One is a Rosin the Bow, one is a temperance song, and one is a Abraham Lincoln and Lincoln and Liberty, a campaign song, to underscore the point that was also made earlier that the tunes were fit to many texts.
Well, and to carry your example further, the tune is a widely distributed British tune, as well as Irish, British, American. It's one of the tunes, if you look at the Bronson collection, Traditional Tunes of the Child Ballads, it's one of the tunes that's used for Barbara Allen, but it's also the Boyne Water tune, and it's also a hymn, and it's also Shady Grove, a fiddle tune that I play that I learned from Henry Reed. So the tune itself is part of the larger, how shall I say, common parlance, you might say, culturally speaking, of England, Scotland, Ireland, and America, and it keeps appearing in different guises, but it paradoxically shows not separate strands of influence, but commonality of shared culture.
I would, as the only non-educated person here, just learn my stuff up in the mountains. I want to say to address a couple of points. Alan said that there wasn't a lot of religion in Appalachia during that time. Not to mean that that people weren't spiritual, but it was made evident where we live because the Presbyterians, of course, came down and tried to reclaim everybody. They sent missionaries down and built hospitals and schools, and most of the people in our valleys wouldn't have had any education in my grandfather's generation if it weren't for the Presbyterians. But when the Presbyterians got a big toehold there in Madison County, then there was a chance that the Catholics could come back. And so they sent missionaries also, and they were in competition. And of course, both of them were fighting against the Baptists and the holiness people to see who would get. But the thing that was great for us is we could go to church all the time, and in the sermons you just had to sit through that. But it was the singing that made you go to church. So we go to the Catholic church and sing, and we go to the Baptist church and sing, and the Presbyterian church and sing, even though the Presbyterian hymns and the Catholic hymns were difficult, to say the least. But we could sing together. And the other point I want to bring up is a wonderful story I learned later. I met an English collector. I won't say his name. He's a wonderful man, and he's done so much work in collecting songs from people. I should have done it myself, had recordings of people I learned from. And he came to Sodom not once but twice. And when he came in the 80s, he would always offer a little gratuity to the person who sang. Now, you don't know where we live, but it's a very poor place, and a few dollars meant a lot. And by the second visit, he was up to like $50, if you'd sit and sing for him. And one of the great singers was Kaz Wallen. The Wallen family were all wonderful singers, but Kaz was married to a Virgie Ray, and she didn't sing at all. But this man came in and he was paying everybody to sing. So there was this woman from New York who lived there amongst us named Mary Eagle, and she had all these great collections of books that she brought down to study the folk songs that we were singing. So Virgie went to her and says, "Mary, I'd like to learn a song." And so Mary wrote out the words in a way she could understand it and tried to teach her a tune for a song. So she didn't want to approach him directly, so she was out in the garden hoeing while he was talking to her husband, Kaz, and he heard her singing this song. And he knew the song, he knew it, but he'd never heard that tune before, ever. And he ran out, and she sang the song for him. He paid her, and it is included in one of his recordings. And he says that he never had heard that song, but he knew the lyrics. This woman knew the lyric perfectly. So sometimes when people come in to collect things, if we get a chance to know what you're looking for, and it's profitable to us in one way or another, whether it be by money or prestige, that we kind of put the dog on, you know. And that's what happened when Mr. Sharp came. You know, the Presbyterian missionaries huddled all these women, and the one I was talking about last night, Mary Sands, and lots of others, into these little missions to sing. So you don't know how representative of everyone those people were, because there were people that particular missionary thought that would be a good person for Mr. Sharp to hear. And being Presbyterian, if you look through there, there's not a lot of the body ballads are left out. And in fact, he actually said, Mr. Sharp said that these Presbyterians are doing more to ruin the culture of these people than any other group. And it's probably true, and it happened in my life. My grandfather became a minister, and when he became a minister, then the love songs weren't sung in the house anymore. So there you go. There's a 15-minute dissertation.
If I were religious, I'd say thank God for Vance Randolph, because he
got the body ones, right?
Oh, he collected the body
Yeah,
ones,
for sure.
Separate volume, but that's okay.
So, Cathy, I want to ask you may comment on this too, but I also wanted to ask you to come in and join us and help us talk a little about ballad singing, as in this country it's in part a reflection of women's culture, not men's culture. That is, it's not just women, the men do it too, but this is an area, unlike fiddling, say, in the old days, which was mostly men. It was an area that was shared alike, men and women, and clearly women were important in the carrying on of the singing. And I think it's fair to say that was true all through the English-speaking world.
Absolutely, but the gender, when I grew up in my house, mother and father sang aunts and uncles, but the particular repertoire of my father, he might take on the part of a woman in the song, and vice versa. It didn't seem to matter. You didn't sing manly songs if you were a man. You were just the storyteller, you know. So you gave your rendition, and I think everybody seemed to be attracted to their own unique songs. Everybody in our house had their own particular songs, and they might know some of the words of the other ones, but they learned ones that kind of spoke to them, you know. And we grew up with gramophones, you know, and the weird thing about it was there was as much American music in the 78 collection as there was Irish music. So the Carter family were there, you know, singing as loud as, you know, some old crooner from Sligo or Roscommon. So we never made that much a distinction between the two. It was, and like we were saying earlier, where did the song come from? It didn't really matter. It was a recreational tool, and it was fascinating what we were saying earlier, the different versions, and it's kind of like Chinese whispers, and especially with the oral tradition. You know, you think you hear one thing, and you find the scholars will tell us later that that's not what it's about at all. It's a completely different meaning, but that doesn't matter either, as long as it means something to you. And music seems to cross the all divides. It kind of connects us all, yet it can be used as a tool to beat each other up. I find that fascinating.
I'm calling down the line here for somebody to join in.
To follow up on that, Mary Hegan, who is a woman from County Tyrone who lived in New York, East 95th Street, and a singer of many, many songs. One time when I was recording her, someone who was with me said, "When did you become interested in folk songs?" And of course, that meant nothing to her. She said, "Any songs." And then the woman asked her another question. Did you make a study of them? And she said, "I didn't make a study of them. I wanted to remember the people who sang those songs." And the songs will live on, and I hope that kind of connection. Didn't Henry write "Humanity is our issue"? Isn't that in one of your books? That stuck in my mind, and I think she spoke to that.
So is singing, how shall I say this? This is a random thought that popped in my mind, so feel free to jump on it or contradict it, but is singing thought of in a different way from instrumental music? Is instrumental music thought of as more, somebody said earlier, ethnic, like thinking categories of associated with ethnicity? Is singing different? Of course, certain songs are very much associated with specific groups of people, but in the American context, the singers I worked with thought of them as just the old songs or the love songs or whatever. Right. They didn't think of them as, categorized according to ethnicity or religion or any other category. And they would mix sacred and secular. I mean, they'd love a beautiful sacred song and a beautiful secular song. They weren't for different occasions. The same session could have both. So a very broad feeling I get about the singers that I spent time with, about their view of music. They just thought of it all as good music. I don't know. What do you all think?
I was just one brief thing about the difference for us between the love songs and dance music or our singing Carter family or whatever, is that in the tradition that kept the love songs alive, people sat on the porch and were working. You were doing things with your hands. You were breaking beans, you were shucking corn, and the whole community would be there, and the whole community would be singing these songs. Well, there was really, you're busy with your hands. You had the story was in your mouth, and that. When you're all done with that, and you finally got to the bottom of the corn pile and pulled the liquor out, then the fiddle came out, the banjo, and later on, after Sears and Roebuck, a guitar, and then all hell broke loose, but the work was done.
Right.
And usually then the love songs were put to bed for the night.
Oh, very good. Phil.
I was going to say that the context is important here, in that, like when I was born in 1949, and both my parents sang while they worked. But father sang when he was driving the tractor. He drove 12 miles to where he worked every day. He sang all the time. We could hear him coming home in the evening. You hear his voice coming in the distance singing songs, but everybody sang. And even my mother sang around the house all the time. If I was to ask my mother, does she sing a song, she said she never sang. But I remember she sang all the time. And she taught us songs as well. Okay, that's casual, but radio had a big influence. I remember even in the 70s working with fellas, bricklayers, working on different building sites, and they'd be singing all the time. But these days, if you go to a building site, there's a radio playing, they're playing FM radio. Nobody sings at all. So in other words, you had a huge kind of educated community. They knew what singing was because they all did it themselves. Yes, of course, there were specialised singers in any community. But they could be appreciated because everybody knew how to sing. Therefore, they could appreciate the good singers. But if you go back before radio in Ireland, I guess 1926 is the dividing line, and back before recordings, well, people had no option but to sing, like you were describing there, doing sedentary work. Women working in the house. Sarah Macomb is a big example. In her voice was used in BBC's As I Wrote That programme, but she described singing all the time as she worked around the house. But I remember my mother doing the same. I don't know what songs she sang. I didn't collect them.
Right.
But they're probably uncollectible, probably things she heard off the radio. But I mean, people were always singing songs they heard somewhere. So, John, I think you have another experience in that.
Well, I'm not going to look at that experience for a moment or two. Sorry to refuse your lead, but singing is a thing that I suppose depends on silent spaces, as Fintan has implied. And that there are many places now and many musical situations which are inimical to singing. For example, the average music session has to be quiet in order to allow a singer, which in Ireland is a single voice usually. And also, for that matter, when the pub is the venue, then there are not merely musicians and singers in the pub, but there are also ordinary people who go there to socialize and converse and do whatever people do, give the eye to one another and so on. But music can go on, if you like, only half regarded in a corner where the players are playing to themselves. But the moment the single voice comes up, it is not merely difficult to be heard, but if it is heard, if it forces itself through, either through a microphone or through simple power of voice, it becomes an intrusion on the social life of the other people in the bar. And so that singing in Ireland anyway is somewhat at a difficult point, at any rate, in an organic sense. That is, it's okay professionally, lots of people to stand up on platforms and be mic'd and so on. But the idea of social singing is not as common as it used to be. Although I live in North Donegal, in Inishowen, where even yet there are a couple of families whose social life centres around their own singing and the singing that their neighbours do. They have céilís, they have gatherings together. And I've come to the conclusion largely that the essence of ballad propagation, of ballad survival, of anything of that kind, in anything like the interesting way in which it used to occur, that is, the way in which it used to occur, and allow people to learn the song for themselves, represent it in their own ways, and carry it on with these slight differences that represent differences of mentalities, differences of experience, differences as a song moves, allow us to identify how the society differed from place to place. And only in this sort of way do we get the wonderful variations, the wonderful social hints or hints of society that are in the songs that we so admire from singers in the Appalachians and from the records of the singing which took place before. So that community is enormously important. And I feel that the sort of community which is to some extent now practicing traditional singing is a society of singers, is not a society which reflects society at large. And so we're at a difficult time. We're at a time when, in Ireland at least, the Celtic tiger, within 10 years, virtually undid a great deal of the development of social nuance that had been building up for centuries. We became rich and we built houses which were separate from one another. We built houses which had big televisions and so on. And we went and we watched them. And now that people are poor, they're sitting depressed in their old houses. And I'm overstating things, but this is to some extent. But in the place where I live, there are these 2 or 3 families, and there are grains of hope in that youngsters on their way back from the nightclub in taxis will sing. They do sing. And singing's the important thing. But they don't sing traditional songs. They refer to those as the long songs, the old songs. They sing Kenny Rogers' The Gambler, or The Boys of Killybegs, or Las Vegas in the hills of Donegal, which no one here will ever have heard of, but you can hear what it sounds like. But the matter is that these are songs with which younger people can identify, and which do, to some extent, carry on the idea of singing, even though they represent a vast difference in repertory from that which we, or rather I, stuck in my time warp to some extent, most appreciate. So that what I've said is that there's singing, but it's not the same singing.
One of the interesting things that has intrigued me as a scholar is the fact that Bela Bartok in 1907, or was it 06, published his Hungarian folk music, the preface to which makes a great argument for the importance not of songs, but of style, and understanding the style of singing as conveying the sort of deep cultural history comparable to what Henry discussed yesterday, talking about the inner spaces of those old Aboriginal houses in Ireland and in America. But Percy Grainger and Bartok in the same year published careful, ornate, detailed transcriptions of a song showing style, not just the raw melody or the skeletal melody. And so far as I can tell, they had no idea that they didn't influence each other. They simultaneously sort of hit on the idea that we got to stop thinking about just songs and start thinking about style. Style, it seems to me, when I heard Maggie Hammonds Parker sing, solo singing, always solo, never accompanied, never a group singing together. Many people think solo, they picture it for what it lacks. It lacks accompaniment, it lacks chords, it lacks all these other things. But of course, what it has is this amazing sense of the use of sound and silence to express yourself individually with ornateness and with suppleness, that each person will do a little different, but it's one of the wonderful things that I think is threatened everywhere in modern civilization by forces that are crowding out that grand old individuality expressed through song, or my thought at least. I don't know what you guys think.
I think when you're introduced to solo singing at a young age, it helps your understanding of it. I mean, some people now, my nieces and nephews, when they hear an unaccompanied song now, they're like, they don't understand it. They've never heard it. Why isn't there a guitar or a piano or something like that? But when you're used to hearing it growing up, the nuances and the silences and the style really gets in on you, and you understand it greatly. And it's the most beautiful thing for me now to hear an unaccompanied song. I mean, Connemara or down in Kerry, it's absolutely gorgeous, and it's the rhythm, the freeness of it, the lack of rhythm. My brother, for instance, is a beautiful singer, and you couldn't accompany him if you tried, because his rhythm would be just all over the place, But that's the beauty of it, when you hear him just by himself, putting his own phrase and his own rhythm in. It's a beautiful thing, but dying out, harder to. And I agree with John that with traditional music in sessions, it's much more of a trancey thing for players to sit down and play. They could play for 7 hours at a time, 9 hours, 10 hours. I was in a session in Milltown Malby for 16 hours. I'd say in that time there was maybe 7 or 8 songs sung, and you have to be careful of the ones you sing, because you can't mess with the vibe in the room, So, and then singers go off to a separate place to do their thing, and the two don't connect. They have a disconnect, and time was they didn't. They were much more integrated.
As a fiddler, I confess having fiddle sessions where I saw the singers quietly remove themselves to go off somewhere else made me feel guilty, though I fiddled on. John.
This is one of the things that the work which I've done recently with the singers in my own immediate area, because I didn't know them very well before I moved to that area, reveals that, as one would expect, gatherings were social gatherings first of all. There were many parts to it. There was conversation to begin with. There was a little bit of music which was for dance, and actually in the Cloncha townland, the main thing was the dance. Every dancer would step, 13 step dancers on the floor in a single evening, and every one a singer as well. And there was food and there was drink, not that much drink. It was only lubrication rather than the reason. But the matter is that these events were hugely complex and they were essentially totally social. Whereas now the purpose of our sessions is musical and musical solely, or song and song solely. And it's a complete paradox in that where our songs, the songs from everywhere, were sustained within a singing community or a range of singing communities, because some people had different repertories for different places that they went, so that they were sustained in communities, and somehow or other we have limited our contact with a whole vast panoply, if you like, of other sorts of communication which could add to our form. So that as singers, I very much resent and regret the idea of singers' clubs and singers' circles meeting to sing songs. But the problem is that to some extent, it's an answer to the difficulty in our society of finding a place to sing at all. But somehow or other, we have to put the community back into our lives.
Leaving us, if I could say that, leaving, like I think, I've no proof of this, of course, but I'm going to chance my arm at it anyway. I think in days gone by, there were more songs in a community than tunes. Like the thing is that the function of dance music is actually, it used to be only for dancing. And you mentioned that, that at the end of the night the fiddles came out and people danced. But you didn't need very many tunes to have a dance. You need, a reel, a few jigs or whatever. In any locality in Ireland, before you had collections of music or recordings or radio, people knew very few tunes. There'd be a few local musicians, and the big thing was songs. And that's why ballad sheets, they're proliferated. So I don't know if you, it seems the opposite is happening now. Musicians, yourself, you want to learn more and more and more tunes, and 30,000 wouldn't be enough. It has to be 120,000 tunes you could possibly learn at the present time. But yet your opportunities to learn tunes, you might have learned 5 tunes in a lifetime 100 years ago. So you have all these young musicians around, John. Your answer, they have all this stuff, they have to play it, so hard luck. So I think this is signs of the times, music sessions and singing sessions. Yeah. I don't think we have to necessarily do anything, but that's the way it is.
But John's point also that even if a singing club is not the solution, it may be the solution for the moment, at least keeping something alive there,
But we have to bring what in Ireland is termed the crack. And it's spelled C-R-A-C-K, and it's a Scottish word, and it has nothing to do with drug taking. So that we have to bring the crack back into our sessions as well, not wall-to-wall singing. One of the people to whom I talked said that he was really very unhappy that there wasn't any banter. There wasn't any coming and going. There wasn't any conversation. There wasn't any teasing. Everybody was taking themselves and everybody else far too seriously.
I think our host is suggesting that we have to consider the time.
We've got 2 more minutes, maybe. We are, again, 15 minutes behind. We caught up a little bit, but maybe we have time for one or 2 more comments, and then we'll move on and get some other food for the body.
Yeah. Any question or comment from the audience?
Yeah, this is going to be thoughts were bouncing around my head is like maybe the dying out or the waning of like singing. I sort of see it corresponds with the waning or the sort of dying out of like land-based lifestyles, like where people are feeding themselves and growing a lot of their own food. Have one of those activities where the hands are occupied, like breaking beans or shucking corn or something like that. At least where I live, and a lot of the people that I associate with, we're trying to get back into a lot of those skills and those activities. And I'm excited to maybe see and think of a resurgence of song as that lifestyle sort of reinvents itself or reemerges or something like that.
I think as well that song should, well, it has always represented the culture of the time, and I think there's probably a divide now that it doesn't. And these old songs that we sing have no relevance in today's society, even though traditional music is a living tradition in Ireland. The songs, in a lot of cases, don't reflect the viewpoint of or what's going on in people's lives today. And there aren't that many new songs that are been written in the folk tradition that. But the ones that are do hit the spot with younger people, and they love to hear them. And but they're few and far between, and so it leaves the gap a bit longer. And for young people to sit in a singing session and listen to 25 verses of some old song from the 18th century, it just makes no sense to them, But they'd listen to tunes because it makes them dance, and that's my
I wonder how much professionalism has to do with it too. The breakdown that I wonder if Cathy and Joe may have had the experience as professional singers in contexts in which everybody used to be able to freely sing a song, and they would sort of stand back and no, he's a professional. I can't take that on. Have you experienced that?
Well, I wouldn't personally notice it, no, because I wouldn't have it. If I wouldn't put myself to sing first, if I knew there was somebody else there, I wouldn't.
You just wouldn't do it?
Well, I wouldn't.
So that means you wouldn't sing at all, or you'd wait till everybody else sang?
I'd wait till everybody else sang.
Yeah.
Now, if they press me, I might, but I don't see myself as somebody that important that should
sure.
Have
you.
the session.
Yeah. Joe, I'm just curious.
Most of you have heard me say that I was in a ballad session in one of the few festivals in North Carolina that still have them, and I was up there with the next generation, my daughter-in-law and a cousin, and they're in their early 30s and great singers, and we always talked about the need tradition and how important it was to sit across from the singer, because you got more than just the words when you learn to sing that way. You got the spirit of that person. So when I sing a Lee Wallen song or a Kaz Wallen song, that's what wells up in me. And I was saying something about that, and Donna Ray Norton, a wonderful singer, she says, well, it used to be that way, but now it's need a CD. And it offended me at first, but then I thought, any way that we can keep the tradition going, even though I know you miss a lot when you just listen to a record. You never get. It's not like going to a live performance. You can even a bad performer or a singer can give a good performance, but the record sounds awful. It's all the personality. And I'm sorry that's lacking in the professional realm. When you have a bunch of folks sitting up here and we're going to do a ballad round, that's the way it is, unless people say, well, what are you doing next Saturday? I'd like to come out to the farm. And that happens. That does happen. We have people that come. I have visitors from England and New York, even further away, it seems like, to come and want to learn the songs. And if one person, wants to experience that, that's a wonderful, wonderful thing, because when you get into that situation where I'm sitting across from you and you're repeating the verses after me and you're hearing the story and you're seeing the story, there's much more than just that song. That's that's the community that brought all this together. And
Alan, do you want to wrap it up?
I have no closing comments. I think it was a wonderful panel. Thank you, Cathy, Fintan, Joe, and Art, and John. It was good talking. It led us where it led us. We can't account for it, but that's all right. It was interesting. I see a hand.
Very persistent hand, yes.
In the Scottish tradition, there's certainly among women of working mountain music associated with weaving and packing fish and so on. Similar traditions exist in Africa. I'm not aware of as much of it in Ireland. Do we know that that's in the Appalachian South? And if so, where did it come from? Is there any version of it? You spoke of people shutting the and singing. But would that have come from the Scottish side?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. People say, where are you folks from? And I say, well, according to my surname, which, always tracing paternal lineage over 11 generations is risky at best. It would be a Scottish name, but you can look at me and see that I have some Cherokee ancestry and some English and hopefully Irish, because I sure love the drink. We don't know where our songs came from. We don't know until my generation. We really didn't know where we came from, and we didn't care. We were just we were American, but more or less, there's a book written called The Kingdom of Madison. We were a place unto ourselves, and we were a community that took care of one another and didn't need a lot from the outside, nor did the outside want to come in and give it to us. So that was when that started breaking down and communication and highways came around, then we got interested. People came in and recorded us and told us all these things about the tradition of our songs and paid us. We got interested in maybe, yes, this is an Irish song or this is a Scottish song, but before that, unless it said a name of a town, and even when it said the name of a town, it wouldn't really mean that we knew where the damn town was. But at London, we could figure that one out.
Yeah.
All right.
I have I'll try to make this quick, and it will be partly an answer to that question. I personally am not aware of this kind of work song, like I think you're referring to walking songs and all, in Appalachia. I might be wrong, but there's one whole region since we're talking about the South, not necessarily talking only about the upland South. Let's talk about Mobile, New Orleans, Charlotte, Savannah, Brunswick, Darien, Georgia, where British and Yankee sailors met Hoosiers who were cotton stowers, African Americans, some of whom had worked on the railroads, and the sea shanties. Some of them went to actually as seamen to shore. That was a very important kind of coalescence of the British and the African traditions. There's one particular shanty, "Let the Bullgine Run," which is the tune is Shularoon, an old Irish tune, and it's also related to a minstrel banjo song, "Walking in the Parlor, Hear My Banjo Ring," and so that's a whole area. Maybe that's why I put a ship in the middle of my little sort of poor sketch to show that link and the maritime and the coastal part of this picture.
Well, thanks to the panel.
Thank you very much.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.